This week, we welcome Theresa Lanowitz, Chief Cybersecurity Evangelist at LevelBlue, to discuss aligning tech executives on cyber resilience. In the leadership and communication segment, we'll cover Joe Sullivan. He thinks CEOs must be held accountable for security too, CISOs concerned over growing demands of the role, and more tech chiefs have success measured by profitability and cost management, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide, cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSaint's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersaint.
Your customers' and employees' identities are your responsibility to keep safe. But who is helping you stay safe from identity-based threats? Identity is the key to getting security right. And with the right identity partner, so much more is possible for your business than you thought. From strengthening cybersecurity, to increasing revenue, to reducing inefficiencies and costs, Okta unlocks growth and new possibilities for its customers. Go to securityweekly.com/Okta to learn more about Okta and the company's commitment to leading the fight against identity attacks. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1 password.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode 369, recorded on October 21st, 2024. I am not Matt Alderman. I'm Adrian Sanabria, sitting in for him. And joining me today, I've got Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Adrian. Good to see you again, my friend. Love having you on the show.
Absolutely. I really enjoy coming on here when Matt can't make it, and he subs for me on my show. But always a fun time. Great conversations over here that we don't quite get to dive into on my main show, which is Enterprise Security Weekly. I don't have anything football related. Like, I noticed football was on while I was we've got this great German beer garden that I go to watch Formula One, and the U.S.
Nice.
Grand Prix was yesterday. So we had to catch that, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw the Titans were playing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, usually Matt and I will cover some football. I mean, yet another week that my Patriots lost, so womp womp.
Oh, ouch.
And we were in London, so it was an early game. It was like it was 9:30 in the morning here on the East Coast, so that's what time the game started. So it was an early game.
Wow, yeah, I definitely didn't see that. The GP was at the U.S. Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, was 3 p.m. is when that went on. So it coincided with a few other games. Entertaining race. It's something like 500,000 people go out to see that every year. Yeah, it's the biggest of the 3 U.S. ones. Now there's Miami, the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, and the Las Vegas one, which is wild because they're on the streets of Las Vegas. All right. Let's jump into it here. This interview is sponsored by LevelBlue, and today we're talking about aligning tech execs on cyber resilience. And we're excited to talk to Theresa Lanowitz today. She's the Chief Cybersecurity Evangelist at LevelBlue, formerly the cybersecurity arm of AT&T. Theresa, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Hi, Adrian. Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and we just talked on Thursday, so it seems like yesterday we just chatted about some of the stuff, but a little bit different focus here. You guys have some great reports out. Uh, Such a big, awesome report that it has baby reports associated with it, and that's one of the ones we'll be talking about today, which is really focused on alignment in the organization, particularly between the CIO, the CTO, and the CISO roles. But I love also that you include some insight from practitioners, from those that are not at the C-suite level, that are below that. So yeah, tell me a little bit why about why you put together this report and why you're so excited to talk about it today.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, we have that one big report, and it's so big that it spawns other reports. We have different industry reports, and this report, this accelerator, is really designed to take a look at how the CIO, the CTO, and the CISO, those C-suite sort of um, those C-suite counterparts, those C-suite collaborators, they really should be, how they view cyber resilience. And we also have data in our core report coming from not the pure practitioner level, but the IT engineer, the IT architect, so the people who are influencing decisions, people who are a little bit higher up in sort of the economic buyer area as in terms of influencers. We had some great data from them, and we started to take a look at this data, and we said, there is some great information here in terms of comparisons across those three different personas and how those personas are working together or not working together, and how those IT engineers and those architects are really wishing those personas would work together.
Yeah, Teresa, I loved going through this report because it really did hone in on the personas, the motivations of each one of those executives, right? You have the CIO whose focus is connecting the business and the business strategy to technology. You have the CTO who wants to push the boundaries of technology and innovate and really push innovation into your organization. And then you have the CISO whose goal is, hey, I need to mitigate risk, keep this organization safe, keep my people safe, keep everyone within this organization and our clients safe. And it's really it's cool to see the dynamic between those three roles and how they play out, and the motivations and really what's pushing those different executives forward. Yeah, it's a great report.
It's definitely interesting to see the motivation between those three C-suite executives. And I think the one that everybody can identify with is that CTO. That CTO, that's the person that brings all the innovation, and everybody loves innovation. And then the CISO is often seen as the pessimist in the organization, saying, well, you can't really do that. And what we uncovered is that 77% of organizations say, you know what, we don't know how a cyber incident would impact our organization. But what we also know is that across the board, 73% of the survey participants we looked at, they said, you know what, innovation outweighs risk every day of the week. We're going to innovate all day long, every day. And CISO, you need to figure out how to make sure that you're protecting the organization. And CIO, you need to figure out how to make sure that this innovation goes into the running of the business. So the CTO has a lot of weight, if you will, in terms of pushing the direction, because it's the innovation, it's better business outcomes, it's better operational efficiency, it's more profitability, and so on.
Yeah, and with the CTO, there's, like you said, a lot of weight there, but there's also a lot of responsibility. The right CTO will use that as an opportunity, not something that'll create friction or tension, right? They'll be working with the CIO and the CISO to build those relationships, show the power of innovation, but also bring the CISO along the ride and make sure that they're upfront in the process, right? As they're innovating, as they're building, as they're designing, when it's in a place of iteration, even before it becomes an offering or a product or anything, you're involving the CISO. So they have so much opportunity to make it successful by just involving folks and communicating and learning from each other.
And that's a two-way street. You bring up so many important points. The CTO can involve everybody along the way, even in the ideation phase. And that's ideal. You start to bring people in that ideation phase or the requirements phase, because then the CISO can suddenly start to say, oh, maybe we don't have this control. We're going to have to bring this control in for this new type of thing that the CTO wants to roll out. So having the CTO reach out to their counterparts, the CISO and the CIO team, and the CIO team and the CISO team being willing to work with that CTO, because that CTO, as I mentioned, that's the one that's driving innovation. Everybody wants the innovation. So rather than waiting until after the fact, and we see that all too many times, is that organizations will wait until after the fact to, once something is ready to roll out to production, to say, have we talked to the CTO team? Have we talked to that security team? Or have we talked to that business team, that CIO team, to see how this is going to impact things? And then, of course, we all see there are delays that come about from that, or maybe you have to go back and re-architect something, and that's not ideal. So I think what it boils down to, and it seems almost trite to say, but it is that communication and collaboration. And it's a two-way street between that CTO organization where the innovation is happening and the CISO organization where they might be a little reluctant to do things, but knowing they have to do it, and then the CIO team to make sure that it is the running of the business.
Yeah, I just want to throw out there, it seems to me that typically innovation is a little bit easier to plan for, because a lot of this talks about honing in on like getting on the same page, and kind of firming up the plan to deal with risks, as you innovate. Because we usually get it by the teaspoonful, but with AI, we got it by the bucketful. And I feel like there's some pressure here to absolutely to get some value out of AI, but where, right? Like it seems like it requires, at least on the CTO's part, a lot of experimentation, and maybe on the whole business's part, to figure out where they're going to get value from this thing. At least from the people I speak to, they're not quite sure where they're going to get value out of it. So they're trying it out everywhere, which seems like, maybe the CTO and the CISO have to be just kind of prepared for multiple different paths, whether or not the company decides to try and use large language models internally, or they're just going to use OpenAI or Copilot or somebody else's implementation. Those are very different things to plan for.
And you bring up so many different aspects of how AI is coming into an organization. From a CISO perspective, the CISO can look at it and say, how can we use AI in terms of cybersecurity? How can we use it maybe to help analysts write reports, that sort of thing, from a generative AI perspective? And then from the bigger, broader organization, every person in the organization, I remember speaking with a client last year, and he was saying everybody's coming to him, from the customers that they have to their internal executive organization to everybody inside of that organization, from line of business all the way down to HR, saying, how are we going to use AI? And I think you're right. It did not come to us in minuscule ways. It came to us all of a sudden. And of course, we've been using AI on the cybersecurity side for a long time, also known as machine learning, taking a look at sort of indicators of compromise, enriching those indicators of compromise. There's no way that a human being could do that. But all of a sudden, the genie's out of the bottle, or the proverbial cat's out of the bag with AI. And now organizations have to say, here's how we're going to use it. And from the CISO perspective, they now have to be concerned about how AI is going to be weaponized against them, because we all know that the tooling in the market can be turned around and be used as weaponization against an organization just as well as it can be to help.
Yeah, and also the data issues with AI, right? I mean, data privacy and protecting intellectual property and protecting all of your internal data. Now, couple all that with a statistic that I pulled out of here. I want to say it was like 92% of CIOs said we're good with a certain amount of uncertainty and risk, and really we have an appetite of 92% was like, yeah, we have an appetite for risk, and then with that 81% of CTOs said the same thing. So now the CISO has a little bit of that fight, right? To basically say, hey, I get it, pedal to the metal with innovation, but we may want to be assessing risk along the way.
Yeah, there are buts.
And that's where the CISO comes in. That's where the security team comes in as being the pessimistic group, because everybody's looking at this saying AI is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and everybody else is saying yes, 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 that's true. But the CISO has to take that very measured approach, because the CIO is seeing this as, oh, we can deliver faster, we can be out there, we can make things so much better. The CTO has nothing but opportunity to innovate with AI, including all forms of AI, machine learning, AI, generative AI, neural networks, and so on. And the CISO has to kind of not play the bad guy, but kind of pull people back into reality and say, this is the risk
What
that we
about?
face. And
What
and
if?
and that's a healthy discussion to have.
Yeah, 100%. And that it just completely supports the fact of getting the security team involved in these innovations way ahead of the curve, right? Like you were saying, in the ideation phases, start having those conversations now, right? As you're thinking about how you could leverage it, as you're, throwing spaghetti against the wall and putting ideas out there. Guess what? Bring the security team in, bring the CISO in, and have those conversations. So you can identify that risk up front so you can build accordingly.
Well, this comes down to secure by design. And one of
Exactly.
the things we know is that we don't have enough secure by design going on. And as we start to move to where SBOMs are becoming critically important, we've had in this past year in 2024 attacks on the software supply chain into repositories that developers might be using. So this idea of secure by design has to really take foot.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of a uphill challenge that is, because traditionally, particularly in startups, that are expected to grow at this phenomenal rate, secure by design, like some of those founders might see that as early death, right? Investing too much in security early on. And there's all kinds of examples out there, right? Like Dropbox, my last count had 7 breaches, I think, there's all kinds of examples like that you can point to where I don't know if it slowed them down or not, but I think certainly like on the privacy side, we've seen a lot more impact there, particularly with thanks to GDPR and things like that. Less so maybe with some of the breaches that insurance can absorb and stuff like that. But I wonder how hard CISOs in some of those organizations have to push for that, as opposed to maybe some of the organizations you've been in Jason. How much of an uphill battle that is. It probably ranges, I would guess.
Yeah, I would say it ranges. And one of the things that I made sure as I took the role and the responsibility of CIO and CISO of a $500 million consulting company, IT services, managed service provider, the first thing I did was make sure I built relationships and trust across the entirety of the organization. That was step number one. It wasn't
Before yelling at them.
But yeah, it wasn't going in and saying, this is where you're presenting risk. This is where we need to shut things down. It wasn't going
Who's
in
this
like
guy,
a
right?
bulldozer, right? And you can't walk in the door like a bulldozer. What you need to go in is open, willing to learn the business, learn the motivations of not just the CIO and the CTO, but your HR leader, your CFO, go across the entirety of the organization and build the relationships and build trust. Yes, it takes time, but that elbow grease that you put in up front is worth every minute, because you want to know what now you have? You have a consensus across leaders when you walk in the door to the CEO. When you walk in the door to the board of directors, you've built a consensus now. You have multiple leaders saying the same thing about risk, saying the same thing about cybersecurity. And now you have a team of folks who can go influence. It's not just the CISO. It's not just the CIO.
Yeah, you bring up such a great point, Jason. It is building that consensus among all stakeholders in the organization, not just the technical stakeholders. And you said the first thing you did was you went in and you built that consensus among all the leaders. And I think some people might look at that and say, that's easy to say, but why in the world should I do it? I need to get to work and I need to figure out what my cybersecurity controls are going to be, what my technical platforms are going to be. So why, and I 100% agree with you that that's what you need to do in terms of going in and building that consensus among leaders. So why should people look at that and say, okay, that's the first thing I need to do? I need to utilize my soft skills, so to speak, versus my technical skills.
So I'll say this. You made a great point, Theresa. Folks want to know what their cybersecurity controls are going to be. Well, that's not an edict from upon high. It can't be an edict from upon high, because if you don't understand the business, you're putting controls on the business that are going to be in place. It could be an impediment to the business, right? And as a cybersecurity leader, I never wanted to be seen as a roadblock, an impediment, or something that's going to slow the business down. I wanted to be a business accelerator while helping manage risk and making sure we're bringing the least amount of risk to the business. The only way to do that is to understand every business unit and how they operate. Then you can put the proper controls in place. Once you understand that will not be a roadblock and an impediment to the business. And if it does create some friction, now you're having really meaningful conversations with those leaders, and you can talk about the risk appetite. You can talk about putting things in place, and you can be very, very proactive on how you implement these things that may cause a little bit more friction. But now you have the evangelists out there in the organizations that are not you.
I love what you said about being a business accelerator. And that ties into some of the data that we have. And what we found is that across the board, CISOs told us that their budgets were largely reactive. So if there was a breach, a competitor's breach, some sort of cybersecurity insurance requirement, they would get funding to be reactive and fix that versus working across all of those leaders that you mentioned, everybody from the line of business all the way down to HR, and say, what are your critical few objectives for the business for this year? And then planning accordingly and being that business accelerator. That's what we uncovered in all of the data that we had. That was one of the most important things, because what we still see is that cybersecurity teams are isolated, siloed, and oftentimes an afterthought. And they should be that business accelerator that you talk about.
And Theresa, you want to know what? I'm gonna plant a little seed for folks listening. The first thing you can do is go get a copy of the business plan of your organization. Find out what the top critical goals of your company are, then start aligning your programs to that. How are you helping move the needle for every single one of those critical mission goals that your company has, right? I've said it before on the show. I made sure that my security team always aligned to opportunity and revenue that was coming inbound. So for example, if one of our clients was doing a risk assessment against us, a compliance assessment against us, the CISO had their team evaluating us for risk, I would make sure if we won that opportunity, we tagged it with cybersecurity to say we helped move the needle on that opportunity, to the point where our cybersecurity team was helping influence $14 million a quarter of closed revenue. I know that off the top of my head because those are the things we looked at, because we wanted to make sure the business knew we were helping accelerate the business.
And you were talking, I think, specifically there, Jason, about supply chain, where your position was in the supply chain. And that's another one of the things that we identified in our research is that very few organizations, in fact, 61% of the organizations we surveyed said they have very poor to little to no visibility into their supply chain. And you think about it, and there is probably not one organization on this planet today that is not working with some type of either physical supply chain or software supply chain.
Right. And one thing that I pulled out of this too, because I actually took a note on this, Theresa, every single one of the personas or stakeholders in your report, I think, agreed that supply chain security was critical. CIO, CTO, CISO, the folks who were outside of the C-suite. I want to say that third-party risk, that was a line item in every single one of their concerns, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, it was. And that third-party risk, it's done nothing but increase because the supply chain has gotten so robust.
Yeah, and as you were mentioning earlier, talking about proactive spending. It seems like something else, Teresa, I saw in a report is it looks like the folks that are not at the C level are just about begging for some of that work. Which I imagine that they want to get out of firefighting mode, right? Like you go to some companies and they're just jumping from one fire to the next fire, and they feel like they never have time to really sit down and tackle the fundamentals.
Well, that's exactly right. And in this accelerator report that we have out, we even said to the people who are sort of one step away from being the ultimate economic decision maker, use this to be able to go to your organization and say, hey, we have to have proactive cybersecurity budgets. We have to align what we're doing on the cybersecurity side with our critical few objectives. Otherwise, we are, as you said, Adrian, we're just going to be in constant firefighting mode. So it's interesting when you have the people who are not at that executive level saying, this is what we need from the executives. And they have been loud and clear about that, in that this is what we need from our leadership. This is what we need from our executives.
And now in the report, it really did a good job of laying out some concrete actions that each one of the personas could really focus on, right? From the CIO and some actions there, the CTO, and even the CISO, right? Here are some concrete actions you can employ to better embed yourself in the business and gain trust. Can you just cover maybe some of the top of those actions that each persona should be focused on?
So, from a CIO perspective, one of the top things we pulled out is that the CIO needs to really foster that collaboration across the organization, because oftentimes, not oftentimes, we still do. We all sit in our own in our own silos. If we're a developer, we sit in our development silo, and we probably don't go and talk to the cybersecurity team and say, hey, what's going on over there? So the CIO can be better at fostering collaboration across the board. The CTO needs to be better and probably more communicative about this idea of innovation and risk. So, as you mentioned earlier in our discussion, go out there earlier, get all of the stakeholders involved. Say, hey, here's what we're going to do. How is this going to impact us from a risk perspective? And then from the CISO perspective, the CISO should really be fighting for and advocating for, along with their counterparts and their peers, to say we need to have a more proactive type of cybersecurity budget versus a reactive cybersecurity budget. Yes, we know there are going to be things that come up for the organization that we probably need to be somewhat reactive with, but across the board, we need to be funding and planning a proactive cybersecurity budget to align with our business.
Yeah. As you talk through that, it reinforces some of the thoughts that I had because it shows the power of communication and collaboration. All of those items require communication, strong collaboration, learning from each other. And it sounds cliche every time we say it, but it's a team sport at the end of the day. We need to be playing together. We need to be working together. We need to all be on the same playbook together.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. It sounds cliche, it sounds trite, but communication, collaboration, those are the things that make teams work so much better, and having those stakeholders involved along the way. And it may be painful at first, but we know that it works.
Yeah, and I spend a lot of my time looking at breaches and trying to understand why companies fail, and communication is always there. There's always issues between departments, and that's one of the things you call out with the CIO here is improved collaboration across departments. And with what you're both saying, you and Jason, if maybe you don't have to be friends, but if you don't trust each other, there's a lot of things that are going to happen here where, yeah, maybe I don't let them know I'm doing that until I already have a foothold and it's going and they can't say no and they have to support me. You start thinking like that, right? Like if you think somebody's going to shut you down before you even get started, or maybe you don't even try, right? If you fear your CISO or vice versa, you think your CTO is not going to listen to reason. Like, you got to patch all that stuff up. You got to be able to trust each other, and go to each other and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. And you can't have that from the CISO side. You can't have that mindset of, okay, how am I going to shut this down? Which is, that's a muscle that they flex too much. I think we flex too much yeah.
The 11th commandment for me was we may be peers, but we're going to go in that back room. We're going to go beat each other up, come up with a consensus, and we're going to walk out this door side by side, hip to hip with a decision. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're describing, Adrian, is more when different teams get together, oftentimes they'll just be reporting out. The CIO team will tell you what they're doing, or the security team will tell you what they're doing. versus true collaboration. So just getting together and doing readouts and reports on what we have done, that's not collaboration. And I love what you said, Jason, that it is, we're going to argue, we're going to have differences of opinions, but at the end, we're going to come out and we're going to have one vision.
That's it. It's a have to have. As leaders in an organization, you need to be able to have those difficult moments. It's not always rosy and sunny and rainbows. There are difficult decisions to make in business. There are difficult decisions that you're hired and paid for as a leader to make those difficult decisions. And every once in a while, it's going to require two folks who aren't agreeing to go sit in a room together, go have lunch together, go do something and figure it out.
Right. Absolutely.
The relationships can't be read only. Yeah, you have to enable some right? It needs to be read right, to where you're willing to, oh, you know what, that's a great idea. Let me go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can reduce the risk for that. And I think that's kind of preventing that knee jerk response that no way are we letting AI in here, which is a lot of the calls I had early on, but. We're not quite 2 years from ChatGPT coming out. It's next month is the 2-year anniversary of when they enabled that. And it was the fastest growing product of all time. If you don't count Meta's Threads, which was kind of cheating because they just automatically created accounts for everybody. But yeah, 2 months, it went to 100 million users. And that's why we're talking about AI so much is, in the consumer world, there's no more line anymore. Between consumer and enterprise, it just like I said, instead of a teaspoon, it was a bucket, and more so than ever, I don't think we have that option anymore. We've got to be open to trying stuff out from the security side.
I think one of the things that enterprises are doing that is so marvelous with AI is they're not saying no. Mm-hmm. They're saying, let's figure this out. They're embracing it because they learned other technologies, social media, for example, which really was the first technology to start to blur the lines between the personal and the professional and the business and the home. And so they learned with social media, they couldn't say, no, we're not going to do this. So I think that across the board, enterprises have taken a very strong stance on AI and they're embracing it versus rejecting it. And I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a great place to go ahead and read out here. Theresa, thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly today. This has been a great discussion.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Thanks, Jason.
All right, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/LevelBlue to learn more. Also in the show notes, we do have links to the reports that we're talking about, so check those out as well. And stay tuned. When we come back, we've got some leadership and communications articles to discuss.